every scene is a conflict, right?
The reason for doing this film was, of course, not just that scene. It was because it's a story of inner conflict, and predominant films are made about external conflicts.
When you read the scene with him and his mom, do you know why that clicked with you?
Being able to feel that these characters actually really belong to this place and these spaces, and they own these spaces.
Yeah, actress Janhvi, she must have gone through rigorous cricket training. I'm
Oh
100% sure,
yes,
right?
a year and a half or more.
I saw Mr. and Mrs. Mahi yesterday,
Hmm.
and what a great little film. I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably the best way to explain it
Hmm.
because it is really focused on just, 4 or 5 individuals. That's pretty
Yes.
much it. Like that's the primary
Yeah.
focus, and I loved that's what I loved about it. But obviously, the performances, the music was really powerful. The score was really really great.
Hmm.
The characters, the script, and the arcs. But what we're here to talk about is cinematography, and I loved the look of the film. I really did. I mean, it wasn't,
Thank
you
you.
know, anything like you would see, in when I say mainstream, I mean like literally mainstream Indian cinema, where in a story like this, normally colors are very like saturated and it's very bright and all that. So it
Hmm.
was really, really fitting for the story of the film, the tone and the color that you guys went with. Um, yeah, I just want to say that first.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
W- What were your discussions like with the director in terms of selecting the color palette for Mr. and Mrs. Mahi?
Um, I don't know where to begin really, because the first thing is that it's a film based in Rajasthan. It's a film based in Jaipur,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a love story, and it's a film about it's an underdog's struggle. So in terms of color palette, yes, skin tones needed to look warm. We were sure that it should look warm overall, but we didn't want to obviously um, go into too many primaries, certainly secondaries and tertiaries in terms of color, but we want to still retain the color, some colors of Rajasthan, which are intrinsic, and yet, like for instance, Jaipur is called the Pink City.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't always kind of, when we were in real location, we weren't really always looking necessarily for typical Jaipur and everything being typical, even though there are a couple of locations which are typical. But in terms of palette, we wanted it to be earthy, most of all, rooted in earthy. And we didn't shy away from bringing in some of the colors more um, native to Rajasthan and Jaipur. But they were, again, not in, I mean, Rajasthan's probably the most colorful state of all in the north of India. But again, tints and shades of colors which were intrinsic to Rajasthan rather than primary hues, but yeah, tints and shades of it. And earthy because it needed to feel rooted. And I'm not talking so much at the moment in terms of the color of light, but more in terms of production design.
Right.
And we also didn't want it to be like there's a lot of trend about shooting desat and so on and so forth. And we were sure that we won't be going to desat on the film. Yes, the saturation levels will be in control via the color palette of production design, not so much the grade. So yeah, the production design alone dictated a fair amount of the palette of the film,
Yeah, and it
and
showed.
the costumes and the
Right.
costumes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it showed very clearly. And you mentioned something about not showing Rajasthan in its typicalness, right? Like,
Yes.
and I was in Rajasthan. I was in Jaipur in 2013, And when you're driving around, or we're mostly when you're in Jaipur. When I say Jaipur, Jaipur being the city, for people who don't know, Rajasthan being the state. Um, it was, you would see shops, you would see homes, but mostly it's like castle, right? Like history and all that. And the only time you see that in the film, which was is when they are having this conversation, the protagonist, Mr. and Mrs. Mahi, just kind of sitting with the sunlight, which I, by the way, loved in the context of the scene when she makes him realize about the word happiness, and the sunlight
Yes.
is just coming in very, very
Mhm.
subtly. And obviously, it was the happy hour. You guys were probably waiting for that
Yeah.
light to come in. That was really well done, and I like the fact that there was no, your standard, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just cutaways for the hell of the reason of having a song in there. Let's have a song in there, like, a
Yeah.
dreams, like all that stuff. It was very, very grounded. It was so
Hmm.
grounded, and the messaging
Hmm.
of that film about finding happiness. I mean, it was just really articulate, really, really done well. My favorite scene, because I don't want to reveal too much about the film, but I will say this: you see the film, and you don't see the mom that much. And when there's that scene with the mom that comes, I knew right away this is gonna be the scene in the film, and it sure was. It was such an amazing scene.
Yeah, it's the sim. I'd been missing doing some simple narratives and simple conventional drama, which would be non VFX or very little VFX, especially after the two action films I did before it. And so I just wanted to. I mean, it was in fact this very scene that made me say yes to the film.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
told the director that if I want to do this film, I just want to do this film for this one scene. You know,
Yeah. No, that makes sense because it was
and it's so
just.
simple. I mean, the simplicity of it all is endearing, and that's the message is strong, and it just sticks to the basics. Basic inner conflict.
Yeah, and VFX heavy films and um action films, whether it's Hollywood or whether it's India, it they have their place, but at the end of the day, and I'm so glad to see that coming out of this from India now, films like this, films like 12th Fail, which I'm sure you have seen,
Yeah,
right? Just this, and it's not even about highlighting necessarily like in 12th case, like the struggles and the poverty and all that, but it's just anybody can relate to these kind of stories because they're just
yeah,
simple and human stories. I mean,
yeah,
action movies, how many people can relate to, right? They're
yeah.
just
That's true.
escapism. But yeah, it's that. So you said yes, you became interested in the scene because of the mom scene. If I
Yes, actually,
if
and I mean
I
the couple. Yes,
Sorry, please go ahead, please.
the couple conflict, of course. I mean the couple conflict is strong, and yeah, so a few scenes in the film which were absolute stealers and stole my heart was one of them was the mom scene with the mom, and then of course when the two of them end up fighting in the indoor nets when they're practicing and he loses his cool. I think that's a favorite one of my favorite scenes of the film. So yeah, and the father-son conflict. I mean, it's got so much stuff that is relatable for a common man in a
Yeah.
country like India, and especially hinterland India, as well as B towns and C towns and so on. So it's tugs at your heart.
I would disagree with the fact that I think anybody anywhere in the world can relate to that because those are just relationships
That's true,
we
actually.
we all have, right? Like we all
That's
have
true.
those kind of relationships.
That's
And
true.
you recall, and I know it's probably a difficult question to answer, and if I'm becoming a little too personal with this, please tell me so. The scene of the mom, right?
Yeah,
We always, when as audience members, as writers, directors, whatever, reading a script, we're always clicked by something in a scene or in a film, and sometimes we know why, and sometimes we don't know why, right?
sure.
When you read the scene with him and his mom, do you know why that clicked with you? Besides the fact, we all have moms, like I clicked with it too, right? Like, but there was there a deeper reasoning behind it, do you think?
The mother per se has a less has doesn't have so much screen time in the film. It's
Right,
more about the father-son conflict, and the mother is actually, like she says in that scene, that um, और तुम क्या पूछ रहे थे कि क्या कह रहे थे कि मुझे समझ नहीं आएगा. That's what she says. कि
right,
माँ को तो बेटा परिवार के लिए करने में खुशी मिलती है. वो तो ये कभी नहीं सोचती कि उसे बदले में क्या मिलेगा.
right,
you
right,
know so just the sacrifice of a mother, or rather, how the feminine energy of the home is a pillar strength in its own right, as well as that lovely message she gives out, saying that कि खुशी तो बेटा यहाँ होनी चाहिए, right? And so that pursuit of happiness versus actually becoming happiness, or a source of happiness, and finding that as contentment, as an outcome of contentment. And then when she says that your brother, you think he is happy, he's not happy. He's just pursuing one thing after the other, and it's endless. And एक पड़ाव फिर दूसरा पड़ाव, फिर लगता है और कुछ achieve करेंगे तो और खुशी मिलेगी. So it's
right.
basically that sort of message towards contentment leads to happiness.
Right, and I'm just gonna translate because pretty much all of my
Yes,
audience is English speaking.
sure.
Is that the scene in the where the mom says that what you shouldn't expect anything from anybody in return because mothers do so much, and what do we expect? Nothing, right? And you talked about the brother, which I thought was so so when you see the brother, right, like in the scene when he comes from the airport, obviously, the stereotypical in my head is like, okay, there's gonna be scenes with the brothers, there's gonna be that little bit of conflict. Maybe he will take him into confidence down the road, but that just never happens, right? Now,
Right.
which was great, but I'm just curious, was there ever in the script or in the filming more scenes with the brother that may have been
No,
cut out or
no, actually, no.
fantastic, fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
I
glad it
think
was
that,
done away.
yeah, I think it was more about establishing I mean, for an audience to see the comparison, and then for the audience to see the comparisons that he makes, and then, the reasons for him making those comparisons, of course, because of his failure. But no, there were no more scenes scripted with the brother, actually. So, no,
One of the things that I was really impressed by, and you could tell I'm a cricket fan, and I know
I see.
what what cricket is, and I could tell that the protagonist, the actress Janhvi
Yes.
Kapoor, she must have gone through rigorous cricket training. I'm
Oh,
100% sure,
yes.
right?
Uh,
'Cause
a year and a half or more of cricket training.
And because those scenes, like you could tell, like there were no cheating in cutaways, like when you
Yeah.
can do the close-ups of the ball hitting the bat, and a
Yeah.
medium of the her. It was just like the type of shots that she was playing there, and they don't come to you overnight. Like it's a very, very
No, no,
difficult thing.
no. Yeah. So it was, I mean, she worked really hard. The director worked really hard with her on the cricket, meaning that, he's a diehard cricket fan, and he used to play cricket at the state level as well.
Hmm.
And so he got the best of coaches that who could train Janvi, and she had very rigorous training, and through the course of a year and a half, she dislocated both her shoulders at
Really?
different instances. Yes, and so we were not sure whether we would actually be able to finally film with her or not. So we had to give it some time before she recovered and so on. And then again, it was about, and as per the film, the strokes that she needs to play is the one that she needs to master. She doesn't need to master everything, right? So they worked on so many aspects of her, presenting her to be a cricketer or a batsman, a batter. So but yeah, I mean, like, the strokes that she needed to play is the one she was taught most of all, or emphasized. But yeah, it's a lot of hard work from her side, and the director's commitment towards that.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify for people again who don't know cricket is that even the strokes that she played, it's not just about learning the strokes, it's having the right body,
Yes, everything, the right
your
posture, the right body, the right
everything.
attitude. Yeah,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, I was really impressed by the detail by the focus on that element. I'm glad that uh, that the cricket element was very you because I've seen films in the past. I don't remember which ones now because they were not something that I could remember. They're not much memorable. Where you could tell like you're cutting away cheating and
Hmm.
because there was no training. And I'm glad now that that is happening because that's what makes things more authentic and Indian
Oh, for
cinema is
sure.
moving towards that.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
think, yeah, go
please.
ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and then go ahead.
So I think, the response to the trailer was good. And I think the buzz that we would tend to hear that was coming to us was that it's feeling authentic. The word authentic kept coming up from a lot of people. So I think that, the world and the nativity of the world, especially, I mean, a lot of things, like, for instance, the um, variety of that sports shop and the kind of sports shop and which was shot on a set. But, just being able to feel that these characters actually really belong to this place and these spaces, and they own these spaces and they inhabit these spaces. That was important. So that was actually the emphasis for it to feel authentic. And for me, like, for instance, when an actor walks into a set, of course, I've been working with the production designer and the director for some time to establish what the sets would look like and what the set designs would be and color, texture, set propping, etc., etc. So, but for me, one of the measures which I find, um, it's a visceral response, because I feel that um, when an actor walks into a set on the very first time, I'm just looking at the actor, how he's responding to that space. Does he
Mm,
seem to feel comfortable in it? He or she seem to like own it, or and how comfortable is the person trying to get in that space? Because then, like, locations, for instance, are just as much of a character as the character. In fact, the characters inhabit those locations, so they come from there. So yeah, uski sugandh, uski महक आनी चाहिए. It should feel like the actor is a representation, in a sense, of that space that he comes from.
yeah. And the shop, you talked about the shop again. The lighting in there, right, was just phenomenal. And because not when I say lighting was phenomenal, again, people who haven't seen the film, it's not because it was just beautifully lit. It was just so reflective. It was beautifully lit in a sense that it wasn't. It was just reflective in a sense of what was going on in that space between the father and the son, right? And
Yeah,
I really loved and maybe I'm looking into it too much, so please tell me if I did. I
no,
really love this in the shop scene when the father and son are talking, and he asks his son like, "Who are you gonna coach?" Right, and they're both
yeah,
standing in very undertone kind of lighting, and all
yeah,
of a sudden the daughter-in-law comes in, and she's standing at the door with the light coming in as a ray of
yeah,
hope. I thought that was
yeah.
really beautifully done.
Hmm. So yeah, I think, I mean, for me, this film, then again, beauty is just so subjective. I mean, it's not so much about looking great rather than in a film like this. It's more about feeling right. Does it feel right? Does it actually evoke a certain response which is emotionally akin, or emotionally actually generating that response? Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not so much about looking great, it's about feeling right.
Right,
Is it evoking the feeling or not? And yes, I mean, for instance, the contrast, or like, for instance, one of the key sources in the shop are these very high ventilators from where the hard lights coming in.
right,
And so those are conscious choices, of course. Those are not accidents, because, of course, when you're getting onto a stage and you're planning your lighting and you're planning how you want to light it, like, for instance, a very key small decision, but a key decision was, there's this very small little amber window, which is almost in line with where he's sitting at the bill desk.
right.
And there comes this very amber light on Rajkumar or Mahendra's face. So that was that, and the size of that window is pretty small. So it was, for me, that was a literally a representation of that little hope that he has. get out of there, you know.
That's so cool. I love that. I absolutely
Mm.
love that. Um,
Mm.
are you a cricket fan?
Oh yes,
So you're following the World Cup that's now going to take place in
yes,
you.
yes, yes.
Awesome. Big game coming on Sunday.
Oh yes.
Who do you think? Who do you think is going to win?
No, I'm not going to take any guesses on that. I mean, whichever's the better team on the day will and should win.
Yeah, I think it's gonna. As long as it's an exciting game, I'm looking forward to
Oh yeah, that's
the
yeah. I mean,
entertainment.
India-Pakistan games are going to be always going to be exciting. It's
Yeah.
always
I just,
electrifying.
yeah, but I just hope it's not one-sided. Like, like the last,
Yeah, I
I
know.
think
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the last match they played, I don't even, there's so many tournaments going on now. I
Yeah.
think it was an Asia Cup or T20. No, Asia Cup, I
uh,
think, when
Asia Cup.
when
Mm.
yeah, when Kohli took them home at the end,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
the
yeah,
last one. I thought
yeah.
that was, even though I wasn't happy with the result, but it was a great game.
Yeah, right, right.
Um, how did you get into cinema or cinematography?
Well, I studied fine art. I come from a
Yeah.
family where my paternal side it belongs to, I mean, the arts, and we have a few art historians and very well-known art historians in the country. So yeah, I mean, the emphasis was on the arts in my home, but
Mm-hmm.
I studied fine art, and I majored in photography. And I was pretty young. I was about 16 when I started shooting. By 1920, I shot my first print campaign, and then I was a photographer for about another 4 years. But I always wanted to do film, and that's something that I almost established in my head when I was maybe just 12 or 13. I knew that I would want to ultimately do films, So, and I used to watch a lot of films. So then I was sure that I would take the exam for the Film Institute, which is the national film school here, and I pursued cinematography, studied 4 years, and then yeah, that's how I. So about 8 years of photography, and then 4 years of film school, and then my first film.
Was there a particular movie or a moment that gave you that spark that this is what I want to do?
Yes, I mean not as yeah. Well, I mean as a cinematographer,
Just
I
interest in
think
film and then cinematographer, interest in cinematography.
yes, and in terms of film, I have to say it would have to be from Hollywood. It would have to be Lawrence of Arabia and Doctor Zhivago.
Of
And
course.
from India, it has to be this film called Garam Hava, which is by M.S. Satyarthi, which is a film on the partition and the plight of
Ah,
a Muslim family who's being asked to leave from Agra.
I gotta check that out. 1974. I've
M.S.
never heard of it.
Satyarthi,
Yeah,
you
it's
must
on
see it. It's a
YouTube.
very, very, very moving film. Very, very moving film. There was another film which was a Bengali film by Buddhadev Dasgupta, and I saw these when I was very young, and maybe 12 or 13, and they're parallel cinema, and I was exposing myself unknowingly to parallel cinema at that kind of age. And
Mm,
that film is called Bagh Bahadur. It's it's about a man who's a dancer, folk dancer, who dresses up like a tiger, and he's trying to fight the advancement of a circus in his village that's taking over his entertainment shows. Very interesting thing.
I gotta check that out too. Um, we're talking about all these films. One film, and you just mentioned Bagh Bahadur, and I was reading the synopsis, and it said 1989 Bengali drama film. And what sort of came to my memory, I would say probably one of my top five favorite films, not just in Hollywood, but just in general. And I saw this film surprisingly when I was 13, as I shouldn't have. Parinda, Parinda,
Uh-huh.
right? By with Vinod Chopra, shot by
Yes,
Binod
yes,
Pradhan.
yes,
I
yes,
think, I mean, obviously the story, again, very, very tight, family, friends, and childhood friends and all that.
Yeah, very.
Mafia, and the lighting was amazing. Binod Pradhan, I
Yeah,
think he's one of my favorite DPs. I don't know if he's still doing any work.
yeah, he
Um,
is. Yeah, he still is. But
yeah, and to me, that film um is just it was so ahead of its time. I still think it's
hmm
still way ahead of its time. Um,
hmm
I'm just bringing that up because I I feel for me, even though I got into this, like I got the film bug after Jurassic Park came out in 1993, but I also
hmm
part of me also thinks, but in that kind of initiated that love for
Oh wow.
cinema because because in those times, even now, like to have the way the film the climax was unheard of. Like, like
Mm.
what happens to the protagonist. And
Yeah.
I'm just so glad now because in the last 10 years,
hmm
those kind of films are now coming out of India more. Not necessarily but in that type, but just in terms of like grounded stories, proper cinematography and just very, very well researched and thorough and strong script and story. That's the pivotal thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we've come of age in a big way, especially also in the technical departments, and just our collaborations seem much more well-rounded now.
Yeah. What's next for you?
At the moment, while we speak, I've a few scripts that I'm looking at and a few offers. So I'm actually
So
making my
nothing, nothing
priority
in the
list right
works.
now. I haven't signed anything, but very soon.
Awesome. I would be excited to see that down the road. When whichever you sign, when do you think would be the earliest one coming out? Like next year?
Depends on which one I'm doing. I mean, it depends what because a couple of them are very long commitments. So yeah,
So yeah,
and
so next year or the year after. How do you
yeah,
think
yeah.
how do you think Indian cinema has changed in the rise of Netflix and Amazon?
So I think just the content. I mean, there's so many more directors and cinematographers, and the talent base has just increased. Um, mm, Not marginally, but many-fold. So, and also just the content and the acceptance of content, different kind of content. There's a sea change to it. So it's not like, I mean, everything's not dictated by only the bigger actors and the bigger films and the bigger studios. And, there's a lot more, it's much more democratic, I think. And having said that, I think I, you, after COVID, there was just a barrage of series and Um, not so many films, but series which are all crime and crime dramas and revenge and so on and so forth. So I think people have had a lot of it, and I think they're looking now again for different content amongst series as well. So, you know, yeah.
I genuinely believe that people are looking for films like Mr. and Mrs. Mahi and 12th Fail because
Yes, I
those
think because there's, yeah.
please.
Go ahead, please. Sorry, I
No,
cut
no,
you.
no, 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 no. Ane, go ahead, please. Don't worry about me.
So I think that's what, my like the reason I did this film was because I just done two revenge dramas and I was like, no, I just want to do something positive. And, because in the past, I've done films like Super 30 and Katoche, and they're always be close to my heart because they're very strong messages and strong films in terms of content. And it usually were these kind of films that used to come to me about half a decade ago or earlier as well, just like positive, message driven, strong message driven script. So um, then I fell a bit, prey to the biggies. And when I say fell prey, meaning that um, just the little greed of actually
Paying the
uh,
bills.
lighting up bigger sets and bigger um, arenas as a craftsman, so you're sort of exposing yourself to bigger challenges. But at the core of it, it's the emotion that works, and If you're
Yeah.
emotionally connected to a script, there's nothing that motivates you more than being emotionally connected to a script or characters within the script. So
Do you want your next film that you signed for to be big or more emotional and grounded?
ideally, more emotional and grounded.
Hmm. Is there a specific director that you want to work with?
Mm,
When I
there's a
say
few.
specifically from a story and directing standpoint, not necessarily of who they are, but just that element.
So I've always mm, admired Sanjay Leela Bhansali. I've
Mm-hmm.
always admired Vishal Bhardwaj,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So these two people very much from, let's say, I mean, they're a few years senior to me, of course, but nonetheless, I mean, amongst the younger ones, there's a lot of people with a lot of talent. And, even Abhishek Chaubey, for instance, I really like his work. So
What has
there's
he
a lot of
done?
people.
I may
He's done
know
a
his
bunch of
work.
films. Yeah, he's done a bunch of films. I mean, I think he was
Avish.
Urta Punjab, for instance.
Oh, okay, okay. Urta Punjab,
Mm,
yeah.
mm.
And he's done Omkara. He was associate director and writer for it.
Associate director on Empire, yeah.
So he's worked with Vishal Bhardwaj quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
Awesome. No,
Hmm.
that's wonderful. You know, I just want to sort of wrap this up.
Sorry, I must mention Vikramaditya Motwane most a lot, you know. Motwane, Vikramaditya Motwane. Also, Anvita Dutt did Bulbul, and Vikramaditya Motwane
Okay, okay.
did, yeah. So,
Yeah, I'm very more in tune with the directors from the um the ones that we grew up watching, like 80s, 90s, and early
yeah, right, yeah,
2000s. I
yeah,
think I
right.
really like what's his name? The one he does a lot of films with Mahesh Bhatt. His name is he did Malang Mohit Suri.
Mm-hmm. Mohit Suri.
I yeah, I really like the way he I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not crazy about all of his films, but the way he brings in emotions
Right.
and
That's
everything
true. That's
and
true.
music into the film, very, very
Right.
balanced.
Right.
It's engaging to watch.
Right.
Um, what lastly, I just sort of want to close this, Anay, is that this film is about struggle, right?
Yes.
Just constantly. And one thing that i- if you take this film as a case study,
Mm-hmm.
it's like literally every scene, and that's the way it should be in storytelling because that's what life is. Life is just a little bit more expanded, and film is more edited down. Every scene is a conflict, right?
Right.
First, there's like protagonist, Mr. Mahi, played by Rajkumar Rao. He has his dad to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And then he has his wife, um, that she and how he has to look better in front of his wife, and then trying to train her, but it's there's always and then but the and the with the mom scene, going back to it, it boils down to how the problem lies within him, right, among
Yes.
many other things. What do you think your biggest struggle has been in life, maybe 20 years ago, 5 days ago, not necessarily career related, but it can be career related, where you had to overcome obstacles? We all do, but just something that stands
Yeah.
out the most.
I'll just come to that. Let me think that through.
Sure.
Um, but I'd take this opportunity actually for a moment to talk about the reason for doing this film was, of course, not just that scene or another scene and so on. It was because it's a story of inner conflict, and predominant films are made about external conflicts, and I've always been hugely inspired by filmmakers like Sofia Coppola and Spike Jones. You know, stories of inner conflict, and resolution of that inner conflict. I mean, that's where it all lies. The problem lies within it. It only sort of manifests outward. But so yeah, I mean, it was a rare script to me that came by, which was about misplaced or misguided measures of success and happiness. And I think that's a struggle that everybody's going through, including myself, or has been through it. But so I think there's a lot of resolution of a lot of conflicts now over time and years spent in the industry. Or um, so coming back to your question of what are the struggles I've been through, of course, I mean, but some of these struggles are very common across all of us. The same thing, pursuit of happiness and not recognizing uh, the aspect of contentment, because contentment is that one superpower, because you can't really take away anything from someone who's living content. So I think that's been a struggle for including me and many more people. So I think, yeah, I mean, misplaced and misguided measures of success, pursuit of success, and what is success to each person is such a different thing. So not being able to actually live your own truth. For instance, I mean, when thought, speech, and action is not aligned, we're always in conflict, because we might say something, do something else, think something, do something else. So we're always going to be in conflict. And if you can't be, there cannot be any happiness if there is no peace, and peace is the opposite of conflict. So if thought, speech, and action are not aligned in your life, you're not living your truth. You're always going to be in conflict.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I think, um, if anything, if you look at state of individuals, whether it's you and I or anybody else in the world, or state of countries and wars that are going on, it's always about the inner conflict that the inner problems that you have or countries have or whatever that you're not able to address, but you're always taking it out in the other direction, right? And that's what causes even more problems. So dealing with
Yeah,
it's not easy to deal with your own problems because there's this thing in your head that's always telling you, no, you're not the problem, somebody else is, right? And you
it's
have
the
to
biggest
over.
problem. The biggest problem that we all are sick with is our own egos.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what we're sickened by. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's great. And then
You might be.
listen, it's been. Go ahead, please finish it off.
No, I'm saying that even if you're physically well, but you're sick with the ego that's painting you ugly, you're not healthy.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. If you talk about this word now is just thrown around like just a tennis ball, mental health, right? Um, yes, there are a lot of people who are going through a lot of stuff in your space, in your head. We all do. But I think the only way to get out of that, at least, and it's been proven over time again and again. That's what probably your dad used to do. I know my dad was telling me this when I was growing up. Exercise, 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 exercise. Right?
Mhm.
It's like the one thing that you do that no matter what state you're in, if you're angry, if you're emotional, if you're sad, it just gets it out of you and you are totally in different space. I know we're kind of going in a different tangent direction, but I feel that is something that is so pivotal to all of us. Just being busy in a sense that you are self-improving because you feel good about yourself.
Yeah, this thing about exercise, for instance. I mean, the effect it has at a cellular level. Similarly, or mental health or mindfulness, and the emphasis on mindfulness in today's day. I think it's about cleansing. I mean, exercise is actually cleansing you at a cellular level. So it's really about cleansing. And you might broom your home every day, but there'll always be dust that's going to come on the next day. So it's really about that commitment to towards cleansing yourself and cleansing your mind. And when I say cleansing, I just mean that lovely word called harmony. You know,
Hmm.
So if you're not in harmony with your own self, and you like, parents can loosely say when you're growing up that son, be honest to yourself and so on. So, you know, you can't be honest to yourself if you don't know yourself. So you need to spend some time in solitude, trying to know a little bit more about yourself and your predilections and your inclinations and your tendencies and your inner tendencies a little bit. So you need some time by yourself, you know, to recognize where you've come from and where you're going and what your priorities might be or principles or philosophy might be. So you need some time out, basically.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, as when you're growing up, excuse me, like,
Mm.
when you're a kid, you say all these things in, like you see videos of kids just saying things as they are, right? Like they don't know about who's around, what anybody will think, and everybody will call it cute and this and that. But when you grow up and when you go in the world, right? Like until you are sort of under your parents are not going to the external world, or maybe even in the early years of external world, you are quite innocent. But when the world
Yep.
sort of surrounds you and is around you, you start being dishonest to yourself because what the world will think.
Have you
And
ever thought about? Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, please. No, no, go ahead, Anay.
Have you ever thought of the word adulterated?
Which word, sorry?
Adulterated.
Adult rated, okay.
Think about the genesis of that word. It's the moment you are, your innocence, your childlike innocence starts to
Mm.
disappear. You become adulterated, and you're turning into that process of turning into an adult, and therefore the genesis of that word. You know, because you're actually moving away from your true self, your true nature, your innocence, and your, you know, a validation starts to step in, come in, and then you start to move away, and then that word adulteration holds true.
Yeah, and that's what this film is about. It's literally
Yeah,
about
it's
validation.
yeah, absolutely,
Awesome.
absolutely
Awesome. And thank you so much, man, for your time. I wish we could talk on forever, but I would love to have you on again.
wonderful. It'll be
Whenever
lovely.
it would be awesome. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for your
Pleasure to talk
openness
to you,
and your
man.
honesty.
No, my pleasure. Happy to talk to you. And thank you for having me.